Dr. Jaquish. It's really great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited. So my background, I was studying marketing. I was doing my MBA, I was interested in life sciences, exercise. And my father, he's one of the guys who designed and built the lunar rover. So he's been an engineer, scientist. That's the little car that's on the moon for your listeners who aren't aware. So I always had a problem solving kind of logic that was driven into me from him. And when my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis, she was upset. She read some of the statistics about hip fractures and the death rates associated with hip fractures. And she didn't want to take any of the medications because there's side effects associated with all of them. And so what I decided was I was going to look into what could be done from a physical medicine standpoint. And the decision I made was, are there any people out there? Is there a population that has like superhuman bone density? And if there is, let's figure out how they did it. And then maybe I can plug that into my mother's sort of daily life, and then that'll be a way I can address this. So I found that population. It was crystal clear when reviewing the academic literature. And then that was the basis for my PhD in biomedical engineering, was impact emulation. So gymnasts they're the super responders. And they're not super responders because of any genetic reason. They respond because they get the right stimulus, which is very, very high levels of force to the body. Now, they also injure very easily. So my medical device allows for the benefit of high impact. And like the book Osteogenic Loading covers this in depth. I wrote this book while I was developing the technology and finishing my PhD. So that process is very safe. So it takes the danger out of high impact and gives the benefit. So people are reversing bone density, bone loss all over the world, and building higher levels of bone density than they had ever seen before. So like, for example, I'm 2.3 standard deviations above normal. Normal is 0. And like I have, I'm 43 years old. I have bone density that's equal to, a 19-year-old gymnast.
Wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, super powerful bone. I'm not breaking anything.
Can I just ask the question for viewers that don't know how or what Osteostrong is? Do you just mind giving an overview?
Yeah, it's a series of robotic musculoskeletal treatment devices that place forces through the body that emulate high impact. So it's the benefit of high impact without the risks. And when the body goes through this protocol week after week, there's a compounding effect of building stronger tendons, stronger ligaments, stronger bone density, and influencing the density of musculature. So people become very powerful very quickly. And also, there's a neurological effect in that you're training the body to fire more musculature in a much shorter time frame. So you have more access to the muscle that you already have. So one of the most powerful effects I have ever seen. Now, I clearly have a biased opinion. I invented it. But it's one of the most powerful things you could do to the body.
But how do you even come to invent a medical device that sort of older people can use that increases bone density without having the impact?
I isolated the positions humans naturally absorb high impact in. And so imagine you trip and fall, and you put your hands out in front of yourself. The back of the hand is in line with the clavicle, and then there's a 120-degree angle from the upper to lower arm. That's how you'll always respond. Like a little kid goes to fall, or an adult or an elderly person, they all, if they have time to react, they will all react in the same manner. So I isolated just those positions and then allowed people to self-load in those positions so that they could get to these very high levels of force and then trigger the growth. But because it's a self-controlled event with a computerized process, and there's even a robotic arm that gets you into the right position, and you're looking at a computer monitor, which is telling you how much force you can impose, or how much force you are imposing compared to the last time you did it, the best time you ever did it. And so you're kind of competing, but you're only managed by your own neural inhibition. So it's sort of like you can't squeeze a fist hard enough to break your own finger because of the neural inhibitory process. Your brain will shut off muscle. It's not even your brain, it's spinal reflex. Your central nervous system shuts off musculature if you're self-imposing something that could create an injury. Now, you can't break your own finger by squeezing a fist, but you can bang your hand on a table and break your hand. So that's an out of control event versus an in control event. Those are just two examples. So I put control into the equation, self-imposed control and neural inhibition. And that was really the answer. And then we just computer monitor it and record all that data.
So how often would somebody use Osteostrong?
1 time per week, because the metabolic rate of bone is different. Primary mineralization happens in 5 to 10 days. Secondary mineralization, you actually have a knock-on effect for growing bone density for 140 days after 1 instance of osteogenic loading.
That's incredible. And how long does a workout last?
10 minutes. I mean, we don't call it a workout. It's
of course.
Like therapy. Yeah. It doesn't look like a workout. It doesn't feel like a workout. It feels like something happened, and you, like brain activity, like you feel so like ignited when you go through one of those sessions. I don't know if you tried the one in Cardiff.
I haven't yet, no. I think it's still fairly new. Ben and I saw Benny at the Health Optimization Summit that ran in London.
Great.
So I'm definitely going to make my way down there at some point. And you also mentioned there's another one in the UK, in Harrogate?
Yes, in Harrogate.
So John, if somebody doesn't have an Osteostrong facility in their area, what could they do themselves to try and improve their bone density?
They should open an Osteostrong.
I thought you might say that. I'm guessing.
Honestly, if there was another way to do this, I would never have started this business. I would have written a book about that. Yeah. So it is a stimulus that you're just not going to get anywhere. Yeah.
And does anything even come? I'm not saying close, but does it have like some like small benefits, like things like maybe I don't know, maybe things like trampolining or going on a vibration plate, or
so there is no impact in the trampoline.
Okay.
I mean, that's good for lymphatic drainage, blood flow. Like there's definitely benefits to a trampoline, but not bone density benefits. Yeah. Yeah. It's in Osteostrong locations are not expensive to open. It's a great franchise business. So talk to your physician and say, who do you know that could open one of these? Because I want to use it.
There you go, Ben. Your next business idea.
Right. Oh, it's an awesome business. And you're helping people, and it is just like total high-fiving type community. Interesting. When someone does the therapy, whether it's an elderly female or a professional athlete, they look exactly the same as they do it. So no one's ever embarrassed. Like when you go to a gym and you see somebody on the treadmill and you can tell they're self-conscious because they're not very strong or not very fast, or maybe they're a little bit out of balance and they feel embarrassed. Like the people who are lower performers often are very self-conscious in that type of environment. And it's a shame because they need it the most. So with Osteostrong, it's everyone looks exactly the same. And so it ends up being very encouraging, where I'll see an elderly female encouraging a professional athlete. Like, I've seen this a couple of times.
Very good.
And it's like they're like, in essence, sort of exercising together, though it's not an exercise. My other product, X3, it is for musculature and dropping body fat. But it's a very that one will also get you incredibly strong for a whole series of different reasons. But like, it doesn't address bone density because the forces are not high. It takes tremendous forces. So, for example, the hip joint, and this is actually from a study out of Bristol, where they determined what the minimum dose response, the minimum amount of force to trigger bone growth in the hip, is 4.2 multiples of your body weight. So just think about how much you weigh, multiply that number by 4. So people who go to lift at the gym, and I meet women all the time. Oh yeah, I go to the gym. I have nothing to worry about with bone density. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Because you're not getting there. Like, I don't care how strong you think you are, you're not getting there. In fact, there's an iPhone application called Fracture Proof, where you can enter your body weight and hold your phone against your hip joint and jump up and land and see if you can create enough impact force. This whole application is an emulation of that Bristol, United Kingdom study. You enter your body weight, jump and land, and it'll tell you how many multiples of body weight you just put through your hip joint. And it's pretty telling, because the people who are under 30, some of them can get there. The athletic ones can get there. Almost nobody over 30 can get there. In fact, most people can't even get close.
I saw on the website that Osteostrong now have a link up with Tony Robbins. So you're obviously looking to try and expand that business globally. What's your ambition for Osteostrong? Where do you want to take it?
Well, I'm the inventor. I'm taking care of the science, answering scientific questions. A lot of the referring physicians communicate with me. So Albuquerque, for example, has 28 referring physicians. So I really manage those. The one who's driving the growth of the company is Kyle Zabrodsky, and he just wants to get it everywhere. But he's also getting it everywhere right. So you walk in there and you feel like everything is very set. Everything is very organized. It doesn't quite feel like a Starbucks, or a Costa Coffee for you guys. Yes, but everything is very uniform. And it has to be, because when it comes to a medical talk track, you don't want franchise operators to make their own thing up of how they explain it, because they could get a word wrong or something like that. And so we really have to make sure that the talk track is correct, the right information is handed out. No one exaggerates what it does.
So why is bone density so important, John, other than, elderly people falling and maybe breaking bones? Maybe why should somebody maybe in their late 30s, early 40s be concerned around their bone density?
Well, most people have pretty low bone density just because of the poor nutrition that we've had. Plant-based diets are very damaging to bone. Oxalates damage bone. That's what vegetables have. Yeah. So, vegan and vegetarian nutrition is strongly correlated with low bone density and high fracture rates. So, the Western world is 70% plant-based nutrition. So, it's just getting worse and worse. And now when I say plant-based nutrition, I'm including Coca-Cola. Yeah. Because that's made of plants. And that is where people are getting their calories. It's French fries, Coca-Cola, chips. I'm not just saying, by eating your asparagus, you're compromising your bone density. You are, because that's awful for bone density. But it's also, and we see Dr. Sean Baker cites very frequently that vegan vegetarian nutrition. He would try and screw broken bones back together and they wouldn't heal. He would actually see the bone mass not able to heal with vegan and vegetarian nutrition. And we got to get away from plant-based nutrition.
I think it's becoming a larger and larger thing now. I keep on seeing clients as a performance coach who are watching the documentaries on Netflix that are like terrifying them, and then they're like, "Well, I'm going vegan." I'm like, no, really think about things before you react to a documentary on Netflix, because
propaganda is a bitch.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So if you have low bone density in your sort of late 30s, early 40s, John, how does that impact maybe your health and what you do? Obviously, as you get older, that situation will get worse. But are there any sort of correlating health effects when you're sort of in that late 30s, early 40s age? Or is it something that happens afterwards as you get older?
Low bone density is typically addressed. People are alerted that they have low bone density kind of later in life, unfortunately, and they're not cognizant of why they should care about it. Bone grows or diminishes very slowly. So, for example, there are people who used Osteostrong for 2 years, and they'll go back to like the level of peak bone mass, which is considered 30 years of age for the given race and gender of the person, because every race is different. Sorry, liberals, you can cry about that. But ultimately, the bone that you're supposed to have at 30 years old that's considered like the healthiest level, because that's the best you've ever sort of been statistically. So if you can get back there in your 50s or in your 60s, the effect of osteogenic loading lasts 30 years. So you can like what exercise is going to give you a benefit for 30 years?
Wow.
Nothing.
John, when I first came across you, it was on Bulletproof Radio. So I'm a certified bulletproof coach, and so I follow Dave's podcast quite closely. And when I saw the X3 bar, I was just mesmerized. To see Dave Asprey doing the exercises on the podcast and actually talking about the X3 bar in the same breath as ARX, I was like,
wow,
that's just incredible. That you could have created something that is so small, so compact. I mean, I've been using it for 2 or 3 months now. I just find
you got to upgrade, man.
I know. I've got to get an upgrade. Yeah, I know.
You got like the original.
That is the original. Yeah, it is. Yeah. But it still works perfectly fine. Nothing.
Oh, of course, it works exactly the same. For the listeners who don't know what X3 is, basically I took the data from Osteostrong research, and it enabled me to quantify the differences that people have from their impact range at an absolute maximum. And these forces were tremendous. We had postmenopausal population using 7-8 times their own body weight, which professional athletes don't do that. And these are deconditioned people who we got in 6 months to that level of loading. So it just shined a light on really how brutally inefficient weightlifting is, because we pick a weight that we can handle in our weakest position, and then our strongest position, we're really not getting that much of a training stimulus at all. So what we need is a weight that changes. Now, there's 10 studies that show that variable resistance will grow strength and musculature faster than standard weights. But they just picked an arbitrary amount of force to add in variance, because they had no idea like what the optimized ratio was for how much force. So for example, they would put small bands on a bar that also had weights on it, and they'd be holding X amount of weight at the bottom of their squat and 1.2X at the top. Whereas the capacity differences, as I discovered, are X at the bottom and 7X at the top. So what we needed was a stronger level of variance. Now you look at band training, and band training has been out there. Physiotherapists use it. Physical therapists is what they're called in the United States. Been using banded type training for a long time, but the resistances are so weak with standard bands. And it's that way for a reason, because if you get the bands heavy enough, they start to twist your ankles when you're standing on them, and they start to twist your wrists. So the small joints of the body could be destroyed by a heavier type band. So I thought, okay, we can use bands, but we need something to protect the small joints. We need another ground to stand on. And we need something like an Olympic bar. And so that's what drove me to develop the X3. And it works so well. We have a whole host of people on the website who in 6 months have put on 20 pounds of muscle. Very low injury risk. I mean, you can use it wrong and drop it on yourself like any other piece of fitness apparatus. It's heavy training, but it's heavy training. But heavy is, first of all, heavy cannot be avoided if you want to grow muscle. There's no getting away from heavy. So anybody who trains light or uses lightweight banding and they're like, oh yeah, you can get all the muscle I want out of this. Yeah, not true. But it is heavy in a strategic way so that the high forces get delivered where your biomechanics are absolutely optimized, firing much more musculature. Therefore, you get a greater level of fatigue and a greater level of growth. Within 2 years, I put on 45 pounds of muscle. I like, if you saw me a couple of years ago, you wouldn't even recognize me. I'm just a completely different guy. Very muscular, and I got very lean also because of the self-stabilization plus the excessive amount of load. I wrote a meta-analysis on this, and the guy who works with me, Henry Alkire, is co-author on that. We did this meta-analysis and demonstrated that stabilization firing plus load equals a very high level of growth hormone upregulation. So every time you do it, growth hormone skyrockets, and which makes you a lot leaner also. So there's people who are not only putting on 20 plus pounds of muscle, they're dropping body fat at the same time. Very efficient and effective. And it only takes 10 minutes. So coincidentally, I was very excited to do your podcast because it's executives that got excited about this. Like, we still have plenty of professional athletes. Physicians really like it because they typically don't recommend weightlifting, heavy weightlifting, because of the injuries. So it's like, there's like kind of a conspiracy theory out there, on the internet where all stupid ideas come together. Where people are saying, oh, my doctor doesn't understand exercise. No, your doctor does understand how many injuries come out of exercise. So they're conflicted. They don't really study it or care because they just see people destroying joints. Like most orthopedic surgeons are like, well, yes, exercise is great until it's not. And so the physicians really got on board with this because much more growth comes out of this method and this technology, and the chances of injury are far less. And it's also, you exhaust so quickly, it only takes 10 minutes.
Oh, John, I've been so fatigued, like I've never been fatigued before in my life. I mean, I remember being maybe 16, 17, 18, a long time ago, and I think people will relate to this when maybe you're doing a bench press and you have somebody spotting you and they gradually take the weight down, until you just press in the bar and you can't even get the bar up. It's that level of fatigue I feel with X3, but across multiple different ranges of motion. And I think for me, I do have to be careful what I do after X3. I mean, luckily I don't have a physical job. I feel as though I've like worked my muscles to the point where I need time to recover. Yeah.
Right. Well, and this is why I'll never lift weights again. And by comparison, lifting weights is a joke. If you look at the stimulus and what happens in the growth response, especially beginners can see changes in if they're lean, they can see changes in their physiology by the day. So, right, like ultimately, if you're holding the same weight at the bottom as you are at the top, you're not stimulating much, but you are damaging joints potentially because as soon as you get stronger, that weight goes up. But there's a lot of tissue that's more solid in the tendinous and ligamentous tissue does not adapt as quickly as musculature, and so, or it doesn't adapt as much either. So this is part of the reason why, like, performance enhancing drug users can have a lot of joint problems because the drugs influence the size and power of the musculature, but the supporting structure is not there. So they can break themselves up pretty badly. Yeah.
I also found, John, that before using X3, I was getting problems in sort of my lower back when I was standing up for too long. And it would give me sort of like quite a bad pain on my right-hand side. But since doing the X3, I realized that particularly when I was doing the deadlift, I didn't have that much strength. But my strength went up really, really quickly. And then the pain in my lower back just disappeared. I have no pain there now at all whatsoever.
Pain has frequently to do with just the lack of firing muscle in the area. Just because what happens is somebody hurts their back, so they stop doing stuff with their back, and then the joint in question is not supported. I have 2 bulging discs in my back from rugby, actually, when I was younger, and I don't feel them. They're there, but I have no pain whatsoever. I have full range of motion. I can do anything.
When I show people the X3, I feel I really have to explain it to them because they go, "Oh yeah, I've seen bars and resistance bands, in the past." But what makes X3 different from everything else? I know you touched on it earlier, but I think it's probably worthwhile emphasizing the point so that the audience knows why this is different from other things that they've seen.
It allows people to deliver 50 to 100 times the force of any other variable resistance program. And variable resistance has been shown in 10 different studies to be a more powerful driver of muscular strength and muscular size. So it's people look at it and they go, well, it's just bands or whatever. Like, well, that's like saying, here's my smartphone. It's just a piece of glass with some circuits behind it. Well, great. Why don't you tape a pocket calculator to a piece of glass, and then that's your iPhone, right? It's the same. It costs you maybe $1 to do that. So is it the same? But back to the internet commenters, like there's a lot of stupid people out there and they don't know what they're looking at, but they have no problem pretending that they're an authority on that issue. And you just have to tell them, no, you're wrong. That's not what it is. Like very powerful forces. In fact, there's professional athletes that use the product and don't even use the heaviest band. Like I shouldn't say their name because copyright issues, but the professional basketball team that is typically associated with Miami, they use it. All the players use it. And I like that they trade a lot of their players because now a bunch of teams want to use it. These guys bring it with them when they go to another team. Yeah, so I will be training with one of the players from a professional team that might be in the Detroit area.
Very good.
Yeah.
Ben, did you have a question for John?
Yeah, I did. We were saying before we started the recording, John, I think the website's brilliant with all the social proof and it's clear. You looked stacked in your before photos, so I could see there was a difference. Can you just expand on what you were saying in terms of pre and post?
30 pounds of muscle in the first year, 15 pounds in the second year. And I got leaner. I dropped 16 pounds of body fat. And I did start out kind of strong, I guess. You know, when I look at that picture, people are like, "Oh, you're in great shape." And I look at the picture and I don't know. I looked like a fat guy who maybe lifted some weights. Part of the reason I was a fat guy, I was kind of stuck in that mentality of, well, I want to be as big as possible, so I got to keep eating a lot, which just keeps you fat. Yeah, I look like terrible. So yeah, I find that before picture totally embarrassing, but you know, a lot of people are out of shape, so I guess I don't really feel that bad about it. But it does have influence on people who are already very strong in musculature. In fact, there's a guy who used X3 and no weights to go and win the Northern California bodybuilding championships. He won the open class and the over 50 age category. The guy's 57 years old. So he beat a bunch of 20-year-olds.
Wow.
Guy didn't lift any weights, just did X3.
Really, John? That's incredible.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's once someone uses it and understands what they're doing, there's some people that I've seen get the product and yet still don't really understand what they have. You know, the people who, especially in biohacking, they haphazardly jump from one modality to another, not even realizing what effects different things have. It's sort of like a mad dash to like spend as much money on their health as possible. And then when you look at them like a year later, you're like, you improved nothing. Right. You gotta realize the power of the intervention in question and then give it its full test. You know, somebody gets X3, use it for 6 months and see what happens and follow the nutrition program. And don't think you're going to outsmart some of the things. It's one of the biggest problem I have is people want to add stuff like, oh, I'm going to get extra results because I'm going to throw in some, you know, some stupid exercise. And there's a lot of those, by the way, where they're almost creating more of an injury situation than they are like helping anything. And they end up having very diminished results. And then they say, well, you know, it didn't work as well for me as it did for Dr. Jaquish or 20 other 20 people on the website. And it's like, yeah, because you did it wrong. Follow the program. Like I went way out of my way to optimize that so that it's right. And then don't start rearranging it. Like there's a reason Apple glues their phones and there's no screws on the back because there would be some moron who would try and open it up and say, oh, I'm going to put in, you know, an extra memory chip in there or something like that. And they'd ruin their phone. Sort of a problem I see coming from the biohacking industry is a lot of people think these interventions sort of do everything. So people walk in and say, what does this do for cancer? And I look at them like, nothing. Why would you even ask that? Like, totally different mechanism. Why? Now, chemotherapy is damaging to bone density, and we've had plenty of people successfully reverse the bone loss that was from chemotherapy. But and I don't know whether it's comes from silly things like alkaline water, which never did anything, sometimes I hear red light therapy way oversold. Like, oh, it does all these, these 10 things. And I'm like, it does one of those things. The other things, maybe, but probably not. So you want to make sure, because in a way, the customers, the members want to kind of embrace that logic of like the it does everything. And maybe some of that logic comes from yoga people or vegans, because they promise, like, it's like, oh, if you do yoga, you'll never get cancer. Or if you died of cancer, it's because you didn't do enough yoga. And not all yoga people are like that, but it's just an example. Sometimes you hear that at a cocktail party and you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of bad science out there, John, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, the internet helps spread that bad science. It's just like a nexus of misinformation and bad advice. And the people who don't have a reputation to uphold don't care if they're attacked. So they can just go there and just dump all of the silly, biased, incorrect, misunderstanding type stuff. I actually have a hotkey thing on my phone where I press like 2 buttons and it lays down an entire paragraph where I say, like, please don't ever get your medical advice from commenters on the internet. You have absolutely no idea who you're talking to. It might be a 12-year-old.
Yeah, of course.
Don't get your advice from internet commenters. From people who actually have some sort of qualification, understanding, maybe people who've written a book or been on a lot of podcasts, create a successful business around a concept, like me, for example. Just not these clowns.
Yeah.
Follow me. Follow me on Instagram. It's Dr. Jaquish on Instagram, or Dr. John Jaquish on Facebook.
I'd just like to thank you very much for your time. It's been awesome to speak to you. I've been a follower of you for at least 2 years, and I know everything that you say is sensible, it's backed up by science, and it works. So I would definitely advocate everybody follow Dr. John Jaquish.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
I'd like to thank Dr. John Jaquish for his time and fascinating points of view. Do check out John on his social channels. Remember, if you would like to access our content 1 week before it's released, please leave your details at www.upgradedexecutive.com/subscribe, and we will send you a special link so you can access the videos 1 week before we officially release them. You can also follow us on all of our social channels at Connect with UE, and also our website at www.upgradedexecutive.com. Remember, if you like this episode with John, you're going to love the next one. So check out episode 12, which is Eat Like a Carnival.